President Trump has said on multiple occasions that no one could have predicted Iran would attack its Middle Eastern neighbors if it was struck by the U.S. and Israel. Trump has said his administration was shocked by it. But back in 2012, my father, Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, not only predicted it, he clearly laid out the global implications of a new war in the Middle East and America's limits in controlling the outcome.
If the issue is posed in a way in which they have to, in effect, abjectly capitulate, then I think a great many of them will say no. This is a country of 80 million people. And they know that while we can inflict enormous damage on them, they can hurt us a lot. Charlie, we have been now in 2 10-year-long wars. We have wasted an enormous amount of financial wealth, not to speak of lives. Our position in the world has deteriorated. Can you imagine what the consequences would be for us if the conflict in Afghanistan expanded because of the Iranians, if Iraq was massively destabilized, if Bahrain was set on fire, if the northeastern oil fields in Saudi Arabia were attacked?
Do they have the capacity to ignite all of that?
To ignite, yes. To prevail, no. But in the meantime, the consequences, the costs, would be cumulative.
And oil prices would go through the roof.
Yes, and the global economy will be affected. So we're playing with fire here.
So we've heard time and time again, John Lemire, from people in the administration, we could have never seen this coming. Who could have ever seen this coming? Dr. Brzezinski saw this coming 14 years ago. I must say also the men and women who have war-gamed this, people like Dr. Brzezinski over the past 3-4 decades have war-gamed this. They've all come to the same conclusion. We had an oil crisis in, I think, 73. We had another oil crisis, or 74, another oil crisis in 79. They understood the chokehold that Iran had over the Straits and the chokehold that would have over the prices of oil across the world. Because, again, children, if you're staying at home and say, well, let's just drill, baby, drill. Well, that's great. But oil, are you ready? Get your number 2 pencils out. Get your notebook out. Oil is a global commodity. If oil goes up in Europe and in Asia, oil goes up in America. So anyway, but a couple things here, just going down this list. This wasn't hard to see. The first thing that Dr. Brzezinski said would happen, which, of course, the president, everybody else says, oh, we're shocked that this actually happened. Dr. Brzezinski said Bahrain would be set on fire. Saudi Arabia would be attacked. The oil fields would be set on fire. Charlie Rose asks, can they prevail? He said, no, Iran cannot prevail. But they can cause us significant damage, and we're playing with fire. That's the reason why I had somebody who saw this Dr. Brzezinski clip, a journalist who's been around for about as long as Dr. Brzezinski's been around, texting me late last night saying, smart guy, that Dr. Brzezinski. This is why every president before Donald Trump did not go into Iran, despite the fact they would have loved their legacy to have been toppling the Ayatollah's government.
Yeah, Dr. Brzezinski saw this coming. Most foreign policy experts saw this coming. There are those in the Trump administration who suspected this could come, but the president and his top leaders ignored it because they were so taken with their success in Venezuela that they thought the same thing would happen here. That's how it's been explained to me. And that connects to the speech last night, too. The speech last night was the kind of speech President Trump should have given at the beginning of the war. Here's why we're doing this. He didn't then, because he didn't think he needed to, because he thought it would be a conflict that would only last a few days, a week or two at most, and therefore he wouldn't really have to explain the stakes to the American people. Well, we're now in month number 2. Yep.
John, let me ask you. You just said he only thought this would be a conflict that would last a couple of days, a week or two. Who does that sound like? Vladimir Putin going into Ukraine? See, we live in the age of asymmetrical warfare. The age of asymmetrical warfare where weaker countries may not be able to prevail outright, but they can bleed dry another country. You look at Russia, who thought they were going to have Kyiv in 3 days. 1 million Russian troops, maybe have died, 1.3, 1.4 million casualties. Their economy's been wrecked. They haven't been able to take over the Donbass, despite the fact the administration keeps lying and saying that Russia is about to take over the Donbass. Ukraine better to make a deal fast. The Ukrainians say, yeah, no, we're fine. Eat this drone, Russia. And that continues. Well, the words that you just said, you apply that not only to Ukraine and Russia, but now to the United States and Iran. I think we're doing much better, obviously, than Russia is as far as degrading military assets. But this is the new world we're living in. And I just have to underline it again. If Donald Trump didn't hate Zelensky so much, if Donald Trump didn't hate Ukraine so much, if the administration didn't have such contempt for Ukraine, they would have called them before the war and said, listen, we're going to go in there. We know the Iranians have been supplying drones to Russia. Tell us, how do we stop them? But they hated them so much that they didn't do that a month or 2 months or 3 months in advance. If they had, this war would have looked radically different, mainly for our Gulf region allies who are getting pounded every day.
Yeah, the parallels here are uncanny. Ukraine still making that offer today to help. The administration is turning it down. So a few other things about last night. So President Trump was meant to be framing this as this is why we're doing it. I don't know how effective that was. In fact, I heard from a number of people, Democrats and Republicans alike, who was like, what was the point of that speech? It didn't really go anywhere. There was nothing new. But I do think, Mika, it is interesting. We should dwell on a couple things that he didn't say. Yeah. Yes, there was the vague timeline of, oh, this will be 2 to 3 weeks. There was some thought before he took the podium last night that he was going to actually announce an end to this conflict. Right. The markets were hoping he would. So when he didn't, they fell last night. Number two, there's talk, I reported yesterday, the Pentagon has presented the president with 2 distinct military options. I wrote about this yesterday afternoon. One would be taking troops to Karg Island, try to seize those energy productions. The other would be into Iran to take their uranium materials, to try to prevent them from ever getting a weapon. They're ready to go. The assets are in place. The president just has to give the go-ahead. He has not yet. He may never. But those options are ready now. For the first time in this conflict, he could say yes. And then the last thing that thankfully did not happen last night, there were rumors widespread throughout Europe yesterday that the president was going to use his speech last night to announce that he's pulling out of NATO, or that he was going to pull out, or at least say, we're moving our troops, we're going to begin the process of withdrawing from that alliance. That didn't happen. There were some criticisms of allies, but not to the point that was feared. But of course, that will be a worry that persists in the days and weeks ahead, as long as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed.
But can I say something about that? He didn't say that, but no one should kid themselves. No one in Europe any longer believes that the American commitment to come to Europe's defense and under Article 5 exists. We are now in, if you will, a post-NATO moment.
It is weakened, yeah.
It is dramatically changed.
Oh, yeah, sure. Joe, real quick.
Well, it has, and even in the first Trump administration, there came a point where Angela Merkel said to the rest of Europe, we have to stop looking to America. We're going to have to start looking east. We're going to have to start looking to China. We're going to have to start looking to others because we can't depend on America anymore. That was in 2018. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, how close he goes up to the line, whether it's just rhetoric or whether he steps over that line. I suspect he can't do that for a variety of reasons. A lot of that has to do with the fact that despite the fact that they are mute right now, Republicans in the Senate would object to it. I just want to say in closing this block, I want to say the president may not have said everything that people wanted to say. I'm glad he spoke to the American people. He may not have expressed himself in the way that everybody wanted him to express himself, but our commander-in-chief needs to communicate regularly with the American people about what's going on in this war, one of the most significant wars we've had certainly since 2003. So we have a lot of things still that need to be answered. But I suspect if ground troops do eventually go in to try to take those islands in the Straits to guarantee free passage of oil even after the United States leaves, that's something the president needs to explain either before it happens or while it is happening. The Americans need to be kept informed from their commander-in-chief.
Okay, we still have to get to the politics of this, and we do have John Heilman standing by for that. Coming up, we're going to talk about new polling devastating economic numbers and also just overall political implications of this war as we move forward. We'll be right back with much more Morning Joe.